let's proceed now to our second panel discussion. So if you have any questions, as I've mentioned earlier, you want to ask the speaker, you can just type in your question and or your feedback at our chat box or at the QA panel. All right. Okay. Let me just... Okay. To moderate the discussion in one of ISOG's founding members, or is one of ISOG's founding members and treasurer with over 21 years of experience in the Philippine Infosec industry. He serves as the Chief Information Security Officer of PSBank since 2005 and is an active leader and participant of ROOTCON for 15 years. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome on our cyber stage, Mr. Dan Duplito. Good afternoon, Mr. Dan.
Hi, good afternoon, Angela.
Yeah, how are you? So nice to meet you po. Online.
Nice to meet you too. I'm doing fine, Angela, except I'm regretting not taking a bathroom break again
Oh,
before
no.
the last speaker. But I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah,
I can hold it in.
Are you sure?
So how about you?
Yeah, I'm doing good as well. Info load that I'm learning a lot of things today, and I'm so grateful. And having to listen to all of the presentations earlier, I look forward to, of course, to this second panel discussion that you will facilitate, Mr. Dan. But you know, I can see that standards and regulations in the metaverse seems challenging. Security risk, isn't it? Am I correct? Maybe.
You're very much correct.
Yes. So maybe you can give us an overview about this before we call our panelists for this part of our program.
All right, sure. As most of our viewers have probably surmised by now, after the first panel Q&A, securing the metaverse is indeed very, very challenging. But I am somehow comforted by the keynote message earlier by our award-winning central bank governor, Dr. Jokno, where he committed to us that BSP will remain vigilant in protecting the consumers in the uncharted space of the metaverse and in ensuring the proper regulatory policy framework are put in place. So my panel discussion is an attempt to expand on what the governor laid out earlier and hopefully answer some of the most pertinent questions by our viewers, which we have plenty actually, which is very good.
All right. Let's not keep our audience waiting. Let me now call our panelist, Mr. Lyehee of Checkmarks. We also have, there you have it, Mr. Donald Teo of Efficient IP, and of course, Mr. Srinivas Rao of F5. Take it away, Sir Dan.
Thank you, Angela. Okay, welcome again, everyone. Welcome to the second round of the panel discussion with the topic Standards and Regulations, Addressing the Digital Safety in the Metaverse. Good afternoon, dear panelists.
Good afternoon, Dan. Thank you so much for having us.
So I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing your names right. That's Lyehee, correct?
Yep.
And obviously Donald is an
easier name.
Yeah. And this one, Srinivas Rao. How do you want me to call you, Srinivas or Rao?
Make it easier. Just call me Srini. That'll help.
Srini. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So while I was trying to wrap my head around our semi-futuristic theme, Metaverse, I literally wrapped my head with this VR goggle that ISO provided. Yeah, thank you, Tito Archie. So this is actually how you access a metaverse, any metaverse. So I imagine myself entering, for example, Facebook's meta world and trying to purchase virtual or real items using e-money or cryptocurrencies and doing financial transactions and then summoning my virtual branch manager and asking her to change a very critical personal information in my account. That is a favorite data to steal or use by online fraudsters. My mobile phone number. So you can just imagine from that scenario that so many challenges are built into that. One, the authentication and the virtual KYC or know your customer processes, right? Second, there's the technology integration of the different financial institutions that are melded into the single platform. And finally, the regulations and standards needed in the metaverse to protect the consumers. So that last part about standards and regulations is what we will be discussing in this session with some of our distinguished speakers from earlier. I'm happy to see that we have plenty of questions, but unfortunately, we won't be able to accommodate all of them. So I'm sure our viewers weren't just asking these excellent questions just for the prizes alone, right? Anyway, so I just tried to group the questions into regulations and standards, data privacy, authentication, identity fraud risk, and others, and just I'll try to shuffle through the questions as much as I can. But I also have to filter out those questions that have local context because none of my panelists are local. I'm sorry, guys. All right, so let's just start with the regulatory and standards question. So I have it in my list. Initially, I have a long list, but thanks to my thanks to the first moderator in the first panel, he actually stole most of my regulatory questions from the list. But anyway, let me just start with my backup question, which I will ask to each one of you of our panelists. So, what do you think should be the main priorities in terms of regulation and supervision in the metaverse? Let me start with Mr. Lyehee.
Hi, everyone. I would attempt to look at these questions from two angles, okay, two hats. Well, I can wear many hats. Right? One of them will be from the experience as a government, I worked in government for a while, as you can see in my LinkedIn profile. As well as security professionals. I think wearing the hats of the regulators, there are two fundamental things that we need to take priorities. Right, I understand the challenges of regulatory and supervisions, especially on new tech. First and foremost, I believe everyone will take notice and agree, will be the identification of the individual users, the avatars, the people behind that particular avatars, right? So no more like in social media that everyone is a keyboard warrior. We don't know who is that. It could be a cat or dogs behind the scene. We really don't. But in multiverse, we do have a serious interaction, transaction, and so on. We need to identify the person, right? Virtual, connecting to the physical. So that's number one. So once that happens, then of course the protection of that particular user, associated data that is associated to that users and his transaction log and so on, those need to be protected as well, right? It's no different from today when we access the bank, that identity, the privacy of that, our user information are being protected. It's just a different environment. So that's one. And if you distill everything down, the application securities, which is now virtualized, right, is the codes, the application securities need to be the provider of that platform or the services or whichever is need to be accountable and making sure that that is done to the utmost standards. Right. So these are the two things that I would see that these are the main priority from a regulation and protections and supervision point of view for these metaverse.
Yeah, thank you, Lai. I think you struck a main point there regarding the identity of the users in the metaverse. Thank you for that. I'd like to go to Donald.
Yes, so I do agree with Lyehee itself, and I one thing that I want to add on with regards to the identity is in the in the virtual world itself, we can be the avatar, right? For example, today I see a lot of people going virtually to buy what we define as virtual land. I mean, we traditionally we need to go and identify a condominium. We need to visit the physical site before we put down our check or even produce identity to show that we are who we are before we start the transaction itself. So from a policy perspective, now it becomes with regards to the virtual land, is there a title deed? And if there's a virtual title deed, then how do we really identify that? And how do we identify the owner? Because we will be representing ourselves as an avatar, right? it can be, I can be a he, but when I'm buying the virtual land, I can be a she. So do we use the traditional form of a passport or identity card to identify ourselves? And would that be recognized, or is there another form of identity with regards to the purchase of this virtual environment itself? Now, on the other end, where as a consumer, right, if a banking services or a financial hub start to provide all these services through NFT or even other means itself, as a consumer, how would I be protected itself? Meaning that if there is, let's say, a phishing scam, like what happened, sad to say, last year in Singapore itself. So how am I as a consumer can be protected by the regulatory policies itself? Do I get refunded based on what the amount of money that I've been fished or I've been frauded itself? So where is the consumer protection portion?
All right. Thank you, Donald. So it's interesting that you touched on virtual real estate, because there are a lot of applications actually right now that are selling virtual real estates. And I'm a gamer, mobile gamer, so I understand buying items from the game, but it's only limited to that game. I understand. However, for virtual real estate, I just can't fathom why people would do that, because again, as mentioned by Donald, how do you solve the land title? And since it's virtual, it's actually limitless, right? So how do you put value in that eventually? Anyway, so let's go to Srini.
Thank you so much, Satan. Thanks for putting me on the spot, and kind of helps me also address the question a lot. I'll try and address it much better. Try to address somewhere close to as good as the other two gentlemen here, right? Now, why is it relevant to me? I come from the banking space. I worked for a bank for 4.5 years. I work for Maybank. So regulation, regulatory body is a normal, cap on the head that you wear always being in the banking space. Now, again, I keep telling this to most of the customers that I meet, right? Regulatory bodies are defining guidelines. Now, all these guidelines are coming from certain specific frameworks, right? And one of the frameworks that everyone needs to look at and adopt and adapt to is the NIST cybersecurity framework, because it's just not about one aspect of security. It's just not about detecting, or it's just not about identifying. It's about the whole chain of events that you have to do when it comes to securing, let that be your business data, your customer data, let that be anything. It's all about the whole framework. How do you ensure that you have the right systems in place to be able to address each layer of this framework? Now, regulatory bodies will give you guidelines. They will say, your data should be, you should ensure your data doesn't leave your country. Now, a lot of gray areas, right? Leave the country. Which data doesn't leave the country? Any data leaves the country, right? Yeah, you go to Facebook. Do you mean that once you go with Facebook outside of Philippines, Facebook doesn't work? Sorry, it does. Your e-wallets don't work. It works. But it's all about how do you help identify what data is being consumed and served, and how do you protect that? How do you detect if there is some anomaly around it, or is there something that's attacking it? It's all about those key pillars of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recovering from that is very crucial for a cybersecurity landscape. And in the current world of metaverse, trust me, like I told earlier in my presentation, it's a micro thing. What we are speaking about is almost to the edge, almost to the person's eye, almost to in your fingertips. That is way too far away for someone to protect. You can't do anything when it's at your fingertips. It's already there, and it's just a click away, right? Yes. It's all about what you do right from the so many layers behind, how you protect each of those layers right up to your fingertips, right? Even your phone, for that matter. How easy is it for us to go to a social app when they throw an agreement, just click on agree and continue? It's just a click, right? You don't know what data is being sent because you don't read it. That's where you trust the people who develop all of these and bring these devices and systems to you to be able to protect your data. And how should they do it? It all depends on how they follow certain frameworks that have been there. Again, I'll stop myself because there's so many more questions, but want to see how we can address everything. Because if you let me talk, a Bollywood actor will go on doing a 3-hour movie.
Thank you, Srini, for controlling yourselves. Okay, much appreciated. All right, you actually mentioned regarding a framework should be followed because it's related to one of the questions that was asked by one of our viewers regarding standards. So here's a question from Mark. Will there be a standard to be followed to ensure the metaverse will be secure and risk-free? And if these solutions will be created? So you mentioned NIST. So are you saying that it's something that they should start from?
So what I'm saying is, see, NIST is a cybersecurity framework. It's also a supply chain risk compliance framework, right? So again, Metaverse is already end user. It's there at the fingertips, right? Now, whoever is creating this has to ensure that they follow these. Again, is it the onus of an end user? Sorry, what can he even do about it? All he can do is just click, right? So yes, it is very crucial for these standards to be applied for every single provider of the metaverse. Let it be VR guys, right? Let it be anyone. Let it be IoT devices, manufacturers of IoT. All of these guys need to ensure that they follow the framework so that they are able to support the services that they're providing or the devices they're providing. They are able to detect all of these communications that happen across the network and hundreds of different transactions that happen through these channels. They're able to identify, detect, recover, and respond to these appropriately and quickly and proactively. Everything has been reactive for the past few years. Only now we are seeing proactiveness about all this, right? Security has been there for ages. Only today we started to realize, we need to be proactive rather than being reactive.
Yeah, that's correct. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Srini.
Appreciate
it. Another point that I got from Srini there was that regulators have to start thinking thinking away from geological mindset. So because there is no such thing on the internet. Okay. Let's touch on data privacy. Okay. There's a question here from Miss Catherine Risoso. I think she won earlier. Am I right? Okay. What are the regulations to protect personally identifiable information, or PII, data in metaverse environments? So probably I'm asking whether it's from a local perspective from your respective countries or from a global point of view. Donald, can you start off?
So privacy has been a very interesting topic that has been discussed regionally itself, because every countries have their own PII, and I believe unlike in Europe, right, in ASEAN, in Asia itself, each country define their own PII. That means we do classify which are considered as private. For example, in Singapore, our IC numbers are private, but it doesn't mean that our phone number are private itself. So in the metaverse, right, where just now Dan, you mentioned, cyber criminals like to use our mobile phone because this is a means where they can send links, they can send falsify information itself. So it all boils down to with metaverse, with the ever-changing privacy regulation, as we try to catch up with the ever-changing landscape. We should be looking, the regulatory body should be looking into changing what are the kind of data that should be classified, what are the additional things that should be included, and most importantly, how that can be used to synchronize with other privacy regulation across the region itself. For example, if a company who is doing business across Asia, right, then the standard needs to be there on what is defined as a PII across the region itself, like the likes of GDPR in Europe itself. So that's my view on data privacy in the region.
Thank you, Donald.
I think there was a
Yeah,
question about that, even on the question and answer, and which I kind of answered that right there. But
Go
I think
ahead,
I will
Srini.
expand that part, which is very right what Donald said, right? It all boils down to how do you classify your data? How do you ensure that you clearly demark what is important for you and what is confidential, what is critical, and everything. At the same time, technology providers today are also required to be compliant against every data protection act across the world. So, it's just not an organization which is serving their market, but if they're consuming a technology which relates to managing data of the company,
they have to comply.
They are also need to be compliant in providing a technology solution, which is data protected, data privacy protected. So everyone is in line with it. How well comes down to the point of visibility and observability again.
All right. Thank you, Srini. You're making it more complex for us. No. It's really dizzying, actually. I can just imagine different standards for each country, different standards from each region, all going together into this one universe. We still don't know how actually we will handle the data privacy in that particular universe. Okay, anyway, let's go to topic of authentication or identity fraud. I have here a question from Mr. Nestor Lim. Since digital currency is part of a functioning metaverse, how can financial institutions identify the components of the attack surface of various digital currency providers to manage them properly?
Yeah, do you want to target someone? Because I don't want to keep talking and and not others own.
Don't worry, Srini. I will rotate you guys and be fair to the other panelists. Okay. Okay. Lyehee, I remember you were working for government previously, correct?
Yeah. Was with government for several government for about 7 over years.
All right.
Yeah.
So can you do us the honor of answering this first?
So, okay.
So the question is, would you like me to read again the question?
Yeah. So it's relating of how do we conduct know your customer verifications?
No, this one is around digital currency. Let me repeat the question. Since digital currency is part of a functioning metaverse, how can financial institutions identify the components of the attack surface of various digital currency providers to be able to manage them properly? So it's talking about the attack surface from the digital currency providers.
So fundamentally, it extends to, if you look at it, well, Metaverse seems to be a new domain and stuff, right? We distill it down just like we distill cloud, right, into virtualization abstraction. If you look at it, whatever happened to Metaverse is actually an add-on of currently what we have on the internet with virtual reality and the interface into that environment. Right? So fundamentally, the digital currencies and the new cryptocurrency, or whatever currency that you mentioned, still hold true like we have in the physical world. So those regulatory, those identification, those acknowledgement and recognition of those exchange, right? The transactional are the same as what we have in physical world.
So there's no real difference. That's what you're saying.
There's no real difference. So,
okay.
For example, okay, let's. So the way that our digital currencies and so on, right? We are very familiar with that, right? So today we have bank do certain form of authentication, then we do transactions. They are regulated by the monetary regulators of the country and so on and so forth, right? take a step back on the cryptos, right? If you look at how cryptocurrencies works, right? As we go on in the future, how does that crypto connecting to the digital currencies? There is already a link. There's already an exchange that established, multiple exchange, where you're able to transact between different currencies. And then how does those cryptocurrency interact with the fiat currency of the individual country, right? And how does the bank accept those cryptocurrency and fiat currency or digital currencies of that particular country or whichever it is? It's the same, right? In Metaverse, it's a matter of recognizing the similar processes. Against the key challenge going back to would be to identify that person, the avatar is what it is, right? The lady avatar is what when you define as Lyehee in the virtual world is actually the Lyehee, the male Lyehee in the physical world, right? So that linkage not to be happen. The challenge would be for the bank to assure that that link is true, right? The CIA things still exist in securities rights to apply, right? And then because everything is still virtualized, right? There's a lot of injections and scamming or whatever, right? Can be done from the hacker. The hacker can inject himself and then take over. You know, it's just an account takeover. Now it's avatar take over, right?
Yeah.
And then he will take over the whole transaction. He can just sniff the transaction and so on and so forth. So the same problems that we have in the physical world will then transfer into the virtual world as well. Yeah. So that's how I see that it's the same problems. It's just like how we deal with physical world, we're going to deal it in the metaverse world. It's going to be the same. Yeah.
Thank you, Lyehee. But that's my question. How do you utilize the proper identification of the user when you're wearing this? Right? I mean, right now on the traditional online banking platform where you need a KYC you need to KYC the customer, you can always turn on Viber or Messenger and you have video chat with your branch head and you can readily see that you are what you are when you're talking to the branch. But in Metaverse, you only have your avatar that may look like you or may look like another character or any of your favorite toy. And then you're wearing this, and then how do you now ensure that you are, how do banks now ensure or financial institutions know that you are who you are in the Metaverse?
So ultimately
go ahead, Srini.
Sorry, Lee, I'll let you continue. Just probably chime in a little later.
No way.
Okay,
I just want to jump in, just short one. You see, even we thought that, you know, with the goggles and the stuff, eventually you look at it in future, who knows, will be like what, you know, Matrix is about. Everyone have a Neuralink, like Elon Musk is doing, right? And then connect in and so on, right? No matter what, there is an interface, right? There's a platform that go in that create the avatars, right? That avatars itself or whoever is that have a we say a digital identity, a digital certificate, which is, even though virtually we see it, but at the machine level, we still see them as a cert, for example, right? As a string of data that will pass through, and those data can be validated by policies, by configuration rules, and so on and so forth. So that is how we validate. And then, of course, from the user point of view, it will give you a thumbs up or thumbs down, but actually behind the scenes are all the engines that extract those data and comparing those data, validating those data. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Srini,
So let me just you know, identify those as identity impersonation or, you know, identity theft, as we call it, right? Now, how do you really identify your avatar as your avatar? And now this is where it's not about defending the identity. It's about detecting a fraud and preventing the fraud, because this goes into the fraud aspect completely. It's not about identifying or defending something. It's more about detecting a fraud, because this is purely fraud. You're impersonating someone else, correct? You're not you, but you're impersonating someone. If it is you, is it really you? How does a digital or a financial organization guarantee a conversation between the real you who is behind an avatar? Now, how does this happen? Make no mistake, today's world is looking at AI ML driven security solutions in fraud detection and prevention. And that's the best way, or that's the most suitable way today for organizations to detect a fraud and prevent a fraud, right? First, to detect this fraud, you need the avatar to be able to answer a specific question which is relevant to you. Example, right? It might be something very, your personal identification. If it is really you, there is something that you would have saved it as an information within yourself, only you can give. So you need a system which is able to detect that person inside you, which is that personal identification of you, which is not there anywhere in the world. How do you protect that and detect it?
My suggestion for that personal information that you're talking about, Srini, password.
Yeah. That's a very small thing today. In the current world's, password is a very small thing, right? Because your data that is very confidential to you is no more in your pocket. It is there everywhere around the world. How do you put an identification or a mark on it saying it's yours, and now somebody is not impersonating you? That requires a lot of AI ML driven solutions, which again is available.
Yep,
it's all
I
about
understand, Srini.
Yeah.
Yep, but what you're talking about really is with the use of ML and AI is for the transactional part of the security, for securing that.
Even for the identification part, it works.
Yeah.
So just to add on to what the two speakers mentioned,
Yes,
I think at the end of the day, from a financial institution perspective, it's about how do they improve the fraud detection framework or the solution itself. Right today, I know every banks have implemented certain fraud detection mechanism or solution itself. Now, with regards to digital identity, like what Lyehee mentioned, the introduction of digital certificate to identify the goggle that you have, right? That becomes an additional form of identification, maybe coupled with the IP address of that goggle, plus the digital certificates or identity that's being issued to you as Lyehee as a person itself. So all these coupled together can be embedded as input into your fraud detection program and use it to see what is the risk score. And I think that potentially can be a mechanism to truly figure a way to identify you are really who you are in the metaverse environment itself.
Yeah.
I jump in, something that we miss out. There's something that we forgot. There is actually the two eyeballs that we have.
I was about to talk about that. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's I hope someone from Microsoft here earlier, right? Of the developers of these VR glasses, they should integrate biometric identification. Recognition. With this combination of your fingerprint or your iris, then that actually authenticates the device itself and you in that transaction or in Metaverse. So
which is the same way as how we use our mobile phone to log in, which we use our thumbprint. So potentially with goggles, we can use our iris scan as a mechanism to authenticate and log in itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have your iris, you have your goggles that you have a certain hardware ID, for example, some chips ID that you link, whatever. So there will be one form of authentication. Then of course, then you have biometric, which is the second factors. Right? You have two factors now. Yeah.
Correct. We should patent this idea.
Well, there are 200 over people here. They will start patenting.
Or we could also be open to DNA from saliva. Just kidding, guys. All right. That's an interesting topic. Okay, we only have a few minutes left. I'm sorry. I'm just going to go to those questions that are very specifically targeted to our panelists. Let's start with Lyehee. This is from Nestor Lim again. For cloud-native metaverse-based applications, microservices increases the number of attack surface of apps. How do we ensure that each microservice is secure against threat actors interacting in the metaverse?
Very simply, each of the microservices need to be validated. It's part of the application testing process. I mean, the whole security handling of application and the processes, controls are very well documented, right? Basically, we need to do testing, and educate those guys that is doing the testing and development. That will help. Of course, on top of that, you need to have a good inventory of those microservices that you're using, where they are, how they get connected with others, library that they use. You have a very clear visibility. Why doing so? Because if anything happens, your incident response process will kick in. Again, if you go down the route of incident response, then it's practice. Then that is how you will do it at the beginning, the shift left, you do all your testing and so on, your rigor and understanding. And on the ops side, you have the incidents and try to recover it fast. So that's how I think the tool might help you.
So basically, the application security approach is essentially the same if you are addressing the cloud-based or metaverse. All right.
Yeah, it's the same. Okay. So and then you have your ops sites, right? The standard goodie of how a good security practice, right? Detect, response, and recovery, and so on, right? Those need to be part of that whole change of enablement. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Lyehee. This is my last question, and I'm going to address it to Srini. This is a question from Mark Anthony Gregorio. He asked how the security companies cope with the fast evolving technology like Metaverse.
Okay, again, security companies, what they're doing today, again, I think it's more appropriate to do this is to go back to where is Metaverse being created? Where is the inception point of it? Because Metaverse is a consumption point, right? It's totally about where you're consuming it. But if you look at the inception point, the security companies are looking at all those layers, because if you look at the Metaverse, it's a presentation layer. But what about all the other 6 layers that you need to protect? Yeah. Today, security companies are ensuring that all of those layers are protected. Again, my analogy goes back to in my previous presentation, where I was talking, Metaverse is about what is inside that locker that you're trying to safeguard. It's inside the locker already. But to get to that locker, you need to pass the security guard who is right outside the building. Now, how do you ensure there are levels of security is taken care of before anything reaches that particular item inside the locker? So security companies are looking at all of these layers, right? And rightly so. If you ask me, rightly so. You invest, always any organization would look at investing heavily on the perimeter security, and then goes into, eventually into every layer. And today the world is edge. Today, so all security companies are focusing on edge security, which that is where Metaverse comes into. How do we protect? So it's about bundling the security concept onto the edge application itself. So that's where even for a fact, FI works in that mode, right? Instead of having an application sitting in a data center where so many layers of security are there, now how do you ensure that the application actually is at the edge so that it performs right at the endpoint? And how can we protect right there? How can we give a secure application right at the edge instead of traversing through multiple hops of security layers, reach the data center and get a response back? How do we bundle that security policy and push it right to the edge? And that's what security companies are focusing on. It's moving away. It's moving to the edge more rather than sitting somewhere else. Yeah, it's moving to the edge, and that's the right focus area.
All right, got it. Thank you, Srini. Unfortunately, guys, we ran out of time 10 minutes ago. So I have to conclude my panel discussion. So in behalf of the organizers and sponsors of our ISOG event, thank you for sharing your insights. It's always a great learning opportunity to hear from subject matter experts like you guys. And I'd like to thank also our viewers who've stuck with us, even if they're already hungry. And thank you. And even though there's no longer any prizes, they still stuck with us. Is it right, Angela? Ah, sorry. We still have prizes. Okay, sorry, go. Okay, back to you, Angela. Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
See ya. Bye.
Okay. Thank you to our smart panelists. Thank you as well for answering the questions of our attendees. And of course, we are going to end our panel discussion session at this time. How time really flies, no? We were just starting earlier. Now we have come to the end of our webinar. But first, for those of you who didn't have your questions answered, we will get back to you. Don't you worry. We will get back to you separately and address each of your questions. So you can also email us at isogcybersec@gmail.com. Again, that's isogcybersec@gmail.com. All right. And of course, follow our social media sites at LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, our website, isog-org.ph.